I'll make a Maripies on before we get into this beautiful October early afternoon. Whew. Sheesh. So fellas, it's a lot of discourse about feds, huh? Who isn't a fed? We're all feds. We're all psyoping each other, right? On here, we're all engaging in our social capital plunder from each other in raids, marketing raids, in order to ply our wares far and wide, and seeking a monopoly over the authentic proletarian market. Of course, that's what we're doing on here. I'm in competition with everyone else on here, right? Because I want to be the voice of the people, just like everyone else on here. And how do you do that? Well, you need to get your wares in front of the people. They don't know about you. How can you speak for them? They can't even hear you. So, step one, if you want to be the voice of the people, you want to speak on behalf of the people, to the people, provide a service of education for the people on their behalf. You want to be recognized as such as doing so, such that you have the recognition of the people, that you are speaking on their behalf and you're speaking in their interests. Well, how are you going to do that if they never heard about you? Well, I guess you could go walk around, and you could put out a little newsletter, and you could go to the farmers market and have your little newsletter stand. You could sell it door to door. You could go be a door to door salesman selling your wares. That's how it used to be back in the day. That's how they sold general. I believe what oh man, one of the Civil War generals. He was on real rough times. I think it was Ulysses S. Grant. Might be right about that. I'm not so sure, but he was on real rough times. He was out of money. He's a bit of an alcoholic, completely out of money. And Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, gave him a pretty solid book deal for his memoirs on the Civil War, and they sold that shit door to door. They sold a subscription to a book that did not exist yet, but for the production of this book, sold this on speculation to the people, and the people responded. It was one of the biggest selling books of that era was this memoir of the Civil War, and they had to sell it door to door. But these days we got telecommunication systems, don't we, folks? We got telecommunication systems. We got we love nothing more than marketing here. Marketing, advertising, PR, marketing in the sense of getting your wares out there to people, putting on a show, performing a sort of service in this sense, putting on a show like Barnum and Bailey. You got to get them to come to your circus and not the other circus. So, you got to promote even more. And this type of competition over promotions is how you acquire what we might call social capital. Social capital, as everyone says. Social capital is the prevailing form of capital in our specific circumstances as Americans, because we create, we're like the den of social capital. Like, what is fashionable across the world? What is fashionable? What is popular? What media gets the most views across the world? Generally, it's going to be in this American model of social capital, like the Hollywood system, radio, advertising, TV, etc., etc., etc. Now, if you were trying to make it in this market, you are in any real market in any sense. If you're trying to provide any sort of service and you're not just merely an employee in this kind of regimented, abstract sense, like, for instance, if you're a barista, for instance, you don't have to go around advertising your service as a barista or marketing your skills and abilities to do this or engage in competition on that level with competing services. But you do if you were a small coffee shop owner. If you were a small coffee shop owner, you would have to get your name out there in like your local community and provide a better service than these sort of transnational coffee shops, right? So that's what my local coffee shop does. They're in competition with the Dunkin' Donuts down the street, etc., and the other local coffee shops. There's like 3 of them. And people have their own, they market themselves in various ways. They have different things for sale, and they say, our coffee is the best. Everyone's got the best coffee. I got the best coffee. I make the best coffee personally. Just the same way that I am the most authentic voice of the people, and I think, the best job of describing these things. I honestly do believe that. If I didn't believe that, and I didn't sell that belief to you, then why would you have any reason to believe me? There's a type of hyperstitional quality to this type of social capital. It's like in PUA literature, and all these like pseudo Evo psych things. They describe confidence in the same way. How do you have confidence in yourself? How do you have confidence in your services, etc.? Well, you have to first fake it until you make it, because you're not going to be confident at the beginning, but you're going to have to live up to what you're the hype, right? And if you continually don't live up to the hype, then you're going to fail. So you have to constantly be improving. And this is the reason why Americans like capitalism and describe themselves as liking capitalism, because it rewards, ostensibly, at least in theory, right? At least in theory, it rewards the people who provide the better service over and over and over again against the people who provide a insufficient service. It's that simple. So it's like capitalism. It means acquiring this type of social capital on the smallest level. If you're a small farmer and you're trying to sell your eggs, you are going to have to market them to people at the farmers market against other people who are trying to sell their eggs, etc. You can compete on a price level. You can say, I've got the cheapest eggs and they're still good, etc. You can say these are premium, high, the best possible eggs, and you're selling them at an upcharge, etc., etc. There's myriad ways to do marketing, and there's myriad ways to market every imaginable sort of product. So, what are we doing in this corner of the internet? All of us are trying to give voice to the concerns of the people or to the problems of the day. We're essentially commentators over what we call the discourse. The discourse. What is the discourse? The discourse is this network on Twitter and where else have you. Twitter, I think personally, is probably like the trickle down part of the discourse. Everything seems to trickle down from here, like where this discourse trickles down to the rest of the discourse. And the reason for that is because the people who produce the discourse on other mediums are all on Twitter, engaging in the Twitter discourse. That's why Tucker Carlson's writers and Rachel Maddow's writers and the writers for everything in the fucking media sound like they're just writing Twitter threads against their hallucinated ideological enemies. The culture war, as we describe it here, is really a war over social markets, social capital in this sense. One second, I gotta like this. So we see someone like Jackson Hinkle. Jackson Hinkle, I will fully lay out here my personal biases towards Jackson Hinkle. I think he's young. He's not the most like rigidly educated, sophisticated, understanding of Marxism, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that shit is really that important at the end of the day. I think he's an extremely marketable person in the sense that people see him and he looks like fucking all American. You know what I'm saying? Like that is really what a lot of this stuff people be like. He's a spook. He's a fed, etc. Whatever. He comes from a more upper middle class background. That's pretty obvious. I don't think it's really anything hidden. When I was talking to him when I first met him, when I met him down in Austin, all he was talking about his progression into like the thoughts that he had at that time, and he was like, like many people who are going after him now from similar backgrounds, where parents, elite, like educated, college educated, or higher level service workers, people, doctors, lawyers, professionals, etc. People they're working at NGOs, etc. All of these sorts of things. We all know what I mean when I'm talking about this type of like upper strata, the PMC. There's a million fucking names for it. Anyway, so he's raised in something like this. He sees problems in America, Bush era, etc. We all have gone through a similar journey ourselves. So he is blackpilled, maybe you'll say, by the Bernie sort of stuff. After being like on track to be like a Nancy Pelosi young leader of the Democratic Party, right? And what does he do with this social capital that he's just given by his birth in the station that he was in? He could very easily be go that route, right? But I think he's an authentic fan of people like Jimmy Dore, etc. And I don't really come from that side of things, at least anymore. I was probably more on that side, like when I was younger, listening to like Noam Chomsky, and I was like 14, 15, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very common thing. It's a very common pathway through the the networks and ideologies and proliferating in the market as it is today. What does he do with it? Does he just go down that route? I mean, that's probably the best, most lucrative route if you want to just, grift and be a Fed forever. Why wouldn't you just, if you have like no real concerns or no authentic like interest in these things, then why wouldn't you go that route? It's much easier these days. You're not getting banned from things. You have more ability to accumulate even more social capital by not getting banned on Twitch and all of these other things. If you just toe the line, but still present yourself as being somehow very specifically engaged in a dialectical fucking struggle against the prevailing norms. Vaush, for instance, isn't getting kicked off shit, right? Why? Because he says vote for Biden. So at the end, and he's going to support all of the fucking major shit. Everyone goes, oh, he's a Fed. Okay, whatever. I don't know if he's fucking actually a Fed. I don't really care. I don't really care about the specifics of whether or not people are specifically instrumentalized by any of these fucking myriad corporate conspiratorial. So this is how we plan things, guys. It's like we don't have a single unitary Illuminati who controls literally everything. That's the fucking illusion, right? The reality of the situation is that the FBI and the CIA and the NSA and the DHS and the DOD and the DEA and the AFL-CIO and blah 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 blah. All of these things all have their own competing interests, but they all have a common interest on top of that, right? They're competing over how to manage their sovereignty, over this network of sovereignty, over like how should we mediate the discourse is the question at the end of the day. It's a forum. We have a forum. We do not have a unitary executive authority. We don't have a sovereign. We don't have a dictator of the proletariat, you could say. We don't have someone like Xi Jinping or even someone like Putin, who is just like the guy, right? Who is the authority, who is determining the discourse. We have an endless market competition over this, precisely this. So, what do we want to do? What does MAGA communism mean? It means that we're trying to build a broad base of people who actually are like, the people in like the largest sense, not just Democrats, not just people who work the right kind of jobs, right? We're looking for a broad base of people to represent the common interests of the people in general against the common collective interests of the elite. It's literally that fucking simple. You can use Marx and Engels and all of these theories, all these theorists, all of the scientific, economic, etc. All of these things. You can use all of these to further explain this basic truth, which is that there is a common interest of the people and there's a common interest of the few, the many and the few, right? The few are not the many. The many are not the few. So what happens? What happens if you're trying to do this? Then that means that you're going to break the discourse as it currently is, because the discourse as it currently is designed to silo people into demographics. Demographics. It's like cartelization over the people themselves. That's why the duopoly of the party system works. It's saying like, okay, we're going to split the population to red team, blue team. This is how the fucking deep state organizes everything. They have a red team and a blue team. It's an adversarial learning system. It's literally like where the idea for adversarial learning and AI comes from, is from this form of central planning that we developed in the 20th century. It is not like other central planning regimes. It is unique in this sense, in that it is adversarial. It's anarchic in that sense, because it is about having this battle in the highest echelons play out. This is what we consider to be what produces the best results generally, because we have that belief in like, the good, as in the like the literal good and the commodity form of the good, right? Prevailing over like shoddy imitations. Now that's perhaps a bit naive, because we all know that it's like why does Coca-Cola with high fructose corn syrup, Coca-Cola, sell more than some say smaller soda shop that puts out the same thing in a competing form, with like real cane sugar? Does it taste way better? Obviously, it's a better product, but why doesn't it outsell it? It's because Coca-Cola is really a marketing regime, right? Coca-Cola collects a lot of attention. Coca-Cola has the ability to put its shit everywhere so that you're constantly surrounded by it. That is the same thing with the media, right? The same thing with the media is that the Coca-Cola of media, you could say, would be these large media corporations, these media multi-conglomerates. There's really only like 4 media corporations at the end of the fucking day. There's like Disney, there's like Warner Brothers, what is it, Time Warner, and they keep merging together into like a cartel, even more of a cartel than they ever have been. So if like back in the day, for instance, if you got a communist to go on to say Rush Limbaugh, right? And to get Rush Limbaugh to like kind of present this person in like a positive sense and to talk about like a common ground upon these, that would have been people would have been blown away that was even remotely fucking possible. That would have been called culture jamming, right? That's like the goal of these things, is to actually change the discourse and to change the conversation around things. So how do you do that if you're just like, oh, I will only ever talk to only the people who are worth talking to. I only talk to the people who are worth talking to. I wouldn't go on Tucker Carlson's show because I don't want to give him a platform from my platform. If anything, what you want to do is you want to use all of the means you have available so that you can get this out there as much as possible. I'd go on anything. I go on shit all the time that's a waste of my time. I take invites from wherever. If Tucker Carlson asked me to come on his show, I would go on his show. If Rachel Maddow asked me to go on her show, I would go on her show. If Jon Stewart asked me to go on his show, I would go on his show. Why wouldn't I? It makes no sense. That represents my ability to like get what I'm trying to say out to even more people than I can now. I would use any means available to do that. So let's see where the criticism really comes from then. The criticism then is that of doing that. So it's like I am selling something and I will never sell out by trying to grift on this reactionary base who watches Fox News. You know, the Fox News boomers are never anyone that I would ever talk to, ever. I would never get my message out there or try to befriend them in any way. Never, because I'm truly authentic. I mean it so much that I hold this resentment, and even if it costs me my my ability to like make money or put my message out there, I would never ever stoop so low as to go on Fox News. That's a fucking commodity, right? That type of authenticity, that type of I'm the real underground. My Discord server is the real revolution. So how does that happen? It's interesting, isn't it? It's like you have all these people, and they ostensibly agree on more than not, right? They're like, okay, deep state, the elite, the people have an interest that's divergent from the elite. NATO's bad. Arming Ukrainian neo Nazis is bad. All these things, right? That's at least what is popular. That is like a wide ranging understanding. There's a lot of people who think that, even if they're not represented that much in the media, there's a lot of people who do feel that way, and they're not all unified as a base. So what we're trying to do is find all of the people who feel this way and unify them and give them like a better, more authentic voice through struggling amongst itself, right? Where it's like you don't just go on Tucker Carlson and you go, oh Tucker, oh let me suck you off and tell you how cool you are, and like just please give me a job writing for you. That's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to go on and you want to openly disagree on whatever you disagree with. Just be like honest. It's really that simple. Just being honest, telling the truth about what you think, etc., but still seeking to find common cause where possible. It's not. I don't know. Like, is there really anything wrong with that? I talk to fucking enough anarchists and like social democrats and people who fucking hate me all the time, and I try to find common ground with them all the time. I wouldn't go like, oh, these. I'm not going to talk to these people. I won't ever engage with these people. I give people a chance before I block them. Even probably too much. I'm probably too charitable in this sense. So why do you think some of these authentic communists, authentic parapolitical leftists, why do you think that they would be so threatened by this? Because we know that they would never do that. Well, number one, they wouldn't get invited on in the first place because they haven't been able to build a platform that would even seek to do such a thing, right? Their goals are what are their goals? What's the goals of all these parapolitical podcasts? Well, a lot of them are like the whole point of making something like this. Like, how do you get big in the first place? Is you're trying to steal viewers and listeners from other people. You're trying to and how do you do that? You engage in your own sort of fed grifter behavior, your own psychological warfare operations. There's myriad people who are trying to get my audience by smearing me in various ways. They want to, destroy people's confidence in what I'm saying and my authenticity or my value in the same way that I do it to them. I don't have a real problem with the fact that there's this type of competition. I think that I believe in myself and I think that I'll come out on top. I'm not afraid of having to compete. Competition isn't bad in and of itself. Competition is good. You don't want like just a lack of fucking struggle. Struggle's good. You don't want just you can't hurt anyone's feelings. You can't ever say this person is a fucking grifter or this person is it. No, I'm not saying like I'm saying that this is how this works in the discourse. Like how does the word grifter, fed, etc. How are these actually used in the discourse? They're used as a means of trying to destroy confidence in someone else's network, such that you can co-opt their network, their social capital for yourself. It's a form of social capital accumulation, right? Now, I want to accumulate all the social capital. That would be great. I mean, maybe not too much, realistically, But I would like, I would like to have. I've tried to find audiences across all the imaginable demographics. I have a pretty wide audience. I think I have people from all over the world, all over the political spectrum, because I'm trying to build for myself, for my own audience, as wide of a representation of the people as I can, because I want to speak to as many people as I can. That's my goal. Maybe some other people don't have that goal and they're not interested in having that sort of broad base. Maybe they're only interested in monopolizing a specific target demographic. Now, what do you do if you're just trying to monopolize a specific target demographic? You use propaganda that appeals specifically to that demographic and is kind of irrelevant to other people. Most people who see like Jackson Hinkle one on Fox News, cool, that's good that we're getting more of the message out there. But there are some people who are so bigoted against the idea of the people who watch this thing, who watch this program, who dress differently, etc., or like describe themselves with different adjectives, etc., that they would call this counter-revolutionary. This is getting in the way. This is actually fascist. It's actually fascist to try to get social capital from those people. You're only supposed to get social capital from the right people, the correct people, the real proletarians, right? The real proletariat, the real authentic subject, that's real authentic historical subject, which happens to be just my Discord server, by the way. Where the real historical subject is my specific parapolitical podcast and my specific interpretation. This is the authentic political subject. Everything else is grifting. I am the arbiter of all authenticity. And if you have to pass through my judgment, if you want to be real, and that means really, agreeing with me. When you agree with me, and then you have and you're part of my network, and now we're part of the same social network, and we're accruing we're trying to monopolize the social capital over this demographic. Well, we're the demographic called like the real socialists. We're the real communists, right? We're doing the same thing. MAGA communism is the same thing. So obviously, it's going to create a lot of these splits and dissensions. This happens everywhere. I've seen it happen myriad times. It happens with labels. People are fighting over words and who has like the IP rights to calling themselves X, Y, or Z. You can't call yourself a communist. You went on Tucker Carlson. No communist would ever do that. That's their definition. So what is their definition? Their definition is what? What does it amount to? It amounts to themselves. That is their definition. They are the beautiful soul, the beautiful Hegelian soul, where they alone are the ones who get it. Everyone else is fucking lost, and so it goes. I understand this temptation because I fall into it myself. Sometimes I feel like no one else fucking gets it. I'm like, well, does anyone else fucking get it? But there are people who get it. I get along very well with Jackson Haas, and specifically those two people, I think, are people I mesh pretty closely to or see things pretty similarly to me. There are a lot of people who see things similarly to me in different strata. And I like to have all of those people together. Now, all of those people don't all agree with each other. Oftentimes, they're very cruel and rude to each other, and they're trying to peel their social their demographics, their markets, their ways of life, etc. Don't have this complete overlap. So there are frictions. There's always frictions. There's always opposition. There's always tensions on every single level of every single thing. I can look out right now, and I'm seeing the tensions in nature outside of me. I can see, the trees are trying to steal the sunlight from the grass below it, and the ivy that's growing on the trees is trying to steal the nutrients from the trees, right? Everyone is kind of in this media ecosystem, is trying to find their niche. I guess I'm trying to be like I don't know what I'm trying to be in that metaphor. I won't extend it any further. My point being more so that this is inevitable. It's inevitable that there's going to be these types of warrings over the definitions of terms and who gets to call themselves what, and who's truly the radical, and who's truly the conformist, and who's a centrist, and who's actually this and who's actually that. Infinitely so. And people are going to use all means at their dispersal. So like they're going to use gossip and slander, they're going to use everything they can get on you. Everything they can get on everyone and everything. And I think that's fine. I have nothing to hide personally. I'm pretty open and honest about my life. I don't really feel the need to lie about myself or what I do or my experiences or where I come from or what my family members do, et cetera, et cetera. I don't feel the need to lie about that. But a lot of people do. A lot of people do have to lie about that. We see that with there's that great thread that got nuked about that Vox guy who's actually like a multi-billionaire. right? He's actually like a multi-billionaire, but he has the ability to scrub all references to that from the internet. Whereas I don't. I don't have the ability to scrub all lies and slanders that have been said about me. But this guy has the ability to scrub all truth, all these easily verifiable true things from the internet, such that it makes it easier for people to fall and into his confidence game that he represents them and that he is just like them. Now, I don't think I'm just like everyone else. I don't think that I'm like the archetypal American working class proletarian person. I don't portray myself as such. I'm not trying to portray myself as such. I'm from a bookish family of bookish people. I'm mostly from a teaching family. I'm kind of haven't really fallen far from the tree. I'm in my ancestral vocation of writing and teaching. What did my dad do? My dad made his own poetry books that he sold. He was a teacher. He's a public educator. I'm pretty much in the same lineage. I just didn't go the public route. I'm not a public school teacher. I think that what I'm doing is actually more important, or it has the ability to teach and reach more people. And I think in some ways, public education should function more like should functions better on the internet. Most kids learn everything on the internet now anyway. So, like, what do you think? Like, do you think when a kid in high school is like writing an essay or like has to like write about a news story or something, where are they going? Like, they go to the internet and they copy their takes, etc., from things like this. They get that their worldviews, etc., are informed by people who are playing in the same game in the same field that we all are here right now. So obviously, I want to get bigger. I want to reach more people. I would like what I'm saying to prevail over what other people say, because I think I have more confidence in my judgment than theirs. I think I've done a lot of work on this. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I've been working on shit like this for years, for my whole life, really. I've been trying to figure out how things work, how shit's going on. And I didn't always have great confidence in my understanding of things, but I have gained more confidence over my understanding as time has gone on. I can't force anyone to have confidence in me. I don't even desire to try. So, would I do any of these things? Would that make me a sellout in this sort of parlance of like the alt media? Because back in the day, these sorts of criticisms made a little bit more sense because there was actually a threat to the monopolization of all of these media outlets. You know, in the 70s and 80s, you start to see all of these like magazines that used to be independently owned, or at least owned by like a family or something, something like the New Yorker, etc. These institutions were owned and competing amongst themselves, but then they all started to be merged together into these like large ownership distribution companies, like things like who owns Condé Nast and Reddit now? They always have like these names that are easy to forget because they're so bland. It's like the Media Publishing Corporation or something like that. I forget what it is. I forget what it is. You can look it up very easily. I tweeted about it earlier today. Anyway, but like at the time, like with the internet, etc., these things were being threatened by like alt media or small time production, like people putting out newsletters and things on the internet. There was a whole panoply of independent broadcasters, etc. In the early days of the internet, alt media, etc. So this idea that like, oh, you started writing for this big like corporate thing instead of like working on your independent zine for like the scene, like punk sort of DIY types of snobbery over like oh, you went with a big record label, like instead of going with like instead of making your own record label, that sort of stuff. There is like that type of authenticity did have a type, I think, more of a meaningful economic or objective dialectical materialist meaning to it, like this idea like, hey, instead of signing with fucking Warner Brothers distribution, why don't you just do it yourself? That's what communism is to me, is like everyone being able to do things for themselves, like that we're all become more capable and skilled to like do things for ourselves, like that's what Marx, in the day you could be a fisherman and like a farmer, etc. You can do all of these different things because you would have more skills. You wouldn't be forced into the specialization of one particular skill and defined by your role in the productive process by this specialization. That's like proletarianization. The goal is to have the proletariat not be forced into doing their instrumental task for the most of their lives. The goal is to give them more freedom to develop their productive forces in all senses. To give everyone more freedom to develop their productive forces in all senses. And that means what? It means a free market in some ways. It means a free market, especially in education. It means a free market in like recipes. Like this is like what is good about something like YouTube, where it's like, oh, if I want to learn how to make this dish for myself. I have myriad competing enterprises for people who teach or do that for their whole lives. Like that's all they do is they teach, they put out recipes, et cetera, et cetera. And they're competing with each other. It's like, well, whose recipes are the best? And like, they're trying to accumulate social capital in the same way. So like, I have confidence in this person's recipes because I made 3 of them and every single one of them has been banger. So I'm going to follow them. And because they're providing this service to me and teaching me something valuable that I can actually, and I'm able to like learn and do these things for myself. I think that's perfectly good. I think that's great. I think that's one of the best parts of the internet is the fact that we have so much ability to learn how to do things for ourselves. That's what I fell in love with the internet as a child, is that I could figure out how to do anything I wanted to do. I could read about anything I wanted to read about. If I wanted to mod my PlayStation 2 so I could put in custom Guitar Hero tracks, I could figure that shit out when I was like 12 or whatever, however old I was when I was doing shit like that. Something like another thing like this that I'm unreasonably proud of is something like Project Melee, right? The old brawl modification that was made just by internet forum people on Smashboards. They literally just like took apart this game, made their own game, and like purely voluntarily. There was no profit motive at all. Nobody was making money off of it. It was actually criminal to do this, and Nintendo eventually gave them a cease and desist for making a better game than they could. And they didn't do it in a corporate enter. They did this purely voluntarily out of just passion. People came together and made the game that they wanted for themselves. It was a beautiful thing to behold. And what did we see? We saw IP rentier Nintendo smacking them down because they wanted to put out their own new version of Super Smash Bros., which is not nearly as good. Same thing happened with Advance Wars, etc. You can see this happen with myriad things. Or like, people doing fan edits of movies because they're like, this movie could have been better. I think I could make it better myself. And then they do. And then, it acquires an audience. I think that's great. I think everyone should. I love people making remixes of songs, etc. I can't tell you how many fucking like Playboy Cardi remixes I've listened to by a bunch of different people. And like, what are they doing? They're trying to accrue their social capital, confidence in the music that they make such that they can, continue to make music. I think that's great. I like competition in that sense. I like when like people trying to make things better than each other. I don't think there's any problem with competing in that sense. So I'm competing right now. I'm competing with all of everyone else who's holding a space on Twitter right now for your attention. And I'm doing that because I think I have confidence that what I'm saying will be valuable to you in some way. And you can determine that for yourself. I can't make you believe that, obviously. But the point is that I've been doing this for a long time. I've built up people who have confidence in the things that I have to say because I've done this and iterated on this for so long. And like I've said, like I think this is how things are going to go. This is going to happen, and some things I've said have borne out. Or I say things like let's look at this whole Ron Paul Maoist thing, etc. Now it's like people. It was a fucking joke. Everyone thought it was a fucking ironic, funny joke that I was making, but it's starting to seem more and more real every single day when you see like the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, retweeting like Chinese communist officials. I didn't make it up. It was something I observed. That's all. I've just observed it. It's out there in the reality. I gave a name to it, perhaps. There's a million, but it could have been named by someone else or anything. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it exists in reality. We're really competing over our descriptions of reality and how much fidelity they have to it. Anyway, that's my rant. If anyone else wants to hop on, get in the queue. We can also debate shit or whatever. I'm kind of in a ornery mood, I suppose. So if you want to debate some shit, I'm down. I've been getting slammed all day by people for the most stupid fucking reasons. All right. Someone's got to hop in the request here. I'm losing steam. I don't know how long I can just rant by myself. All right, cool. Cash, what up?
And
What's up, man?
the retail workers are the ones to be potential fascists.
Well, I mean, they were saying it themselves in that thread. If you read the threads, people are saying straight up, working retail has made me a spiritual fascist. But I think they're like one of the reasons
What the
being is
fuck?
that like, what does a retail worker do? Is they're like ultimately safeguarding the property on there and like you know what I mean from the people like the customers coming in are actually like their adversaries.
Hmm.
Whereas, like for instance, like if you say owned a coffee shop and you were doing your own retail, like let's say you owned a little coffee truck, right? You owned a little coffee truck. I knew a guy who did this when I worked on Wall Street. Yeah, he owned his own little coffee truck. I don't know if he owned it. Perhaps he was leasing his truck, probably from a bank or something. But he was trying to like do coffee himself. So he sat there and he made the coffee, right? It was his thing. He did that. He owned it, and I wanted to go support that guy. So that's where I would get my coffee is from this guy because he was always there. I talked to him. I had a good relationship with him, and he was interested in acquiring customers because it was for his own benefit. So he wanted me to have a good experience, etc. But a retail worker, it doesn't really matter. Customers come in abstractly. Like they don't like. Does the worker at Starbucks really give a shit if you come back the next time? No, because they don't own any of it. It's not theirs. So the customers then are like their adversaries. Like they don't want to be doing the job that they have in the first place. Nobody wants to be doing that job because it's a job that shouldn't exist. We're going to automate it. We're going to have retail workers in the future. It's completely inefficient. Like how should things work realistically in the future? Like you'll go to a grocery store and it'll be like there. People will still be stocking things, obviously, because like stocking things and like moving things around is proletarian labor, so it like can't be automated in that sense. Same thing with like trucking. I don't ever think that trucking is going to be automated or these things are going to be automated. What will be automated is like a cashier, grocery clerk. Those are automated in a lot of grocery stores already. Most of the time when I go in, if I see a line, I do self checkout. Like because it's a better experience. It's faster. I'm better at bagging the groceries and things the way I want them to be bagged than someone else is going to be.
Yeah, the only reason people are there is so they make sure you won't steal.
Exactly, because they're exactly think about that. So who is around that's making sure that people don't steal? Like security guards, right?
Yeah, that's them.
So these people, they come in and they have to like a security guard where it's like they have to be analyzing people and surveilling them to make sure they're not stealing, etc. And if anyone has a problem, like when you go up to a cop and you're like, "Hey, I'm having this issue," how do they treat you? Do they treat you
Like
kindly?
a
Yeah,
dick?
yeah.
They're fucking dickheads.
Okay.
Like I did some shit
So like, let's
wrong.
say you go to a Starbucks, you're like, "Oh, I think you made my coffee." How do they treat you well?
Nah,
So
no.
like,
They look pretty pissed off and annoyed, to be
yeah, they
honest.
are pissed off and annoyed because they don't want to be doing that work. They want to be doing nothing. They like getting paid for like sitting on their ass, like a security guard. Security guard is like,
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
honestly, and I get so tired of when I watch your debates. Like I come jackasses come in. What do we,
You kind of cutting out here. You should repeat what you're saying because I can't hear it.
how do I sound now? Do
Yeah,
I
you're on
sound
now.
better?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I'm sick of these like jackasses that come in talking about like, what are we gonna do without Starbucks? Like, people's imagination have gone down. I'm like, if we have like nuclear reactors, that can make so much money and wealth for people and just automate the rest of the jobs. And these green fascists, that's the other thing. The green fascists, the green fascists are such slimy people because they have like such a huge hegemony on media. Like they're everywhere.
Yeah,
And it's like
for a
crushing
reason.
people's
Well, it's
imagination.
like why it's like we can look at why do they get to have these huge media platforms? Like who is promoting them? Why are these ideas promoted and other ones aren't? We can see what the class interest is and like the people who promote these things, right? So it's like that's like ultimately what they're saying is like a lot of the criticisms. I can compare this right to like people criticizing Jackson Hinkle for having gone on Tucker Carlson. They're trying to present it as the same sort of thing as like when what's her face, the little Swedish Cyclops girl who tells us all we need to eat less or whatever. When she gets put on things, people are like, oh look, like this is like she's getting money from these people to like go do this. She's being a useful idiot in there's that sense. So, but like it's harder to explain when it's like, okay, so Jackson Hinkle is going on there to like destroy working class solidarity and consciousness for the behind the Starbucks baristas union or whatever. Like that's like their argument, but that doesn't really make sense because there's not really an interest in that. They like yeah, like these people don't have like an imagination. Like they don't think that things can be better in like a new radical revolutionary sense. They just want to make like my incremental incremental steps. And like what that ultimately represents is like a cost of living adjustment. Like, what is this the union going to argue for? They're going to argue for the same conditions they had 5 years ago. Just because inflation has gone up, like we live in a perpetual crisis. So every single year it gets harder and harder to fucking survive. So it's like, okay, well, we're just going to keep up with inflation at best, right? We're not going to revolutionize how the whole fucking thing works. We just want to keep up.
And that's what makes it like so. And I don't want to keep up with inflation. We could be doing so much better right now. And it was also, it's like they're obsessed with losing. I noticed, like leftists especially. Like I thought it was great that Jackson Hinkle got to expand the audience and really speak about
Yeah, they don't want to. They
that
don't want
people
to
that
win.
nobody
They
else is
want to be.
talking about.
They want to be beautiful losers. You know, that like they're like all of their heroes were. Like they don't actually ever.
Yeah,
If you notice, they don't like Mao. They don't like Stalin. They don't like Lenin. They don't like people who win. They don't like people who win. They like the pure
self-flagellation. It's
losers.
fucking gross.
They like the pure losers, the losers who were so pure that they lost. Not the people who won, not the people who actually accomplished anything. They don't like they do not like greatness. Also, the word greatness is offensive to them. Nothing is great. Nothing's great. What's great? Nothing's great. Oh, my sentiments are great.
It's
I have
like they
great
don't have any
sentiments, but nothing
nuance.
in reality is great. They have no
And
appreciation is what it comes down to. They don't appreciate anything. They don't appreciate anything.
it's because
They're
they
just
probably don't
critical.
fucking work.
Well, even if they did, maybe
Like
they
if
all they
we
do is they work and bitch all day. Maybe that's all they do. Do you know how many people there are like that? They just like complain literally all day, every single day about everything all the time.
And I'm thinking it's maybe this just like the type of jobs they have. Like, one thing I do admire about Mao is when he sent them rich people to the countryside because there's a lot of people that need to go build that land bridge. I'm pretty sure their perspective would change.
Yeah, no, honestly, I agree with you. I think that's actually like some people think of that as like a punitive thing, but I think that's actually liberatory. In the same sense, when Jesus was like a rich man comes to Jesus and he says, Jesus, like, I'm miserable. I have all this money, but I'm miserable. And Jesus goes, well, why don't you give away all your money and be like a person, like everyone else? And the guy walks away sad because he doesn't actually want to like improve like spiritually in that sense. Where it's like, hey, if you're miserable, why don't you go do some real fucking work? Like, if you hate your job, why don't you go be like a rancher? Why don't you go be a cowboy in Wyoming? Why don't you go be a miner? Why
Nah,
don't you go
that's
be a
fun.
petroleum engineer? Why don't you go do something like that would be more
And they get
difficult?
paid a lot. They get paid a lot. Like I switched my job and I work at like I'm basically like a mechanic in training, and this way most money I've made since. I'm like when you actually transform, the jobs that make the most money are transforming nature. So the people that go and build the pipelines in the ocean or extract oil from the bottom of the sea, they're gonna get paid bank, even though it's like hard work. It's still like it's probably gratifying at the same time. I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just can't imagine wanting to do retail work for the rest of my life
yeah,
and just
that's what it would
wanting more
represent
cash
if
for
you had
that.
like a retail workers union, right? Then what these are going to do, like every service sector union does, is that they don't actually have a unified class interest. They just want to reward their most loyal employees more. So they create like a tier system where like the more years you work, the more benefits you get. So then at a certain point, you can't afford to change track because it's like you have your health insurance through this, you have your benefits through this, you have your dental insurance through this. Like you worked 4 years to get that, and now you're going to change jobs. Like that's throwing away all of your like safety net that you've acquired from this union. So you're effectively stuck. Like, you know how many fucking public school teachers like shouldn't be public school teachers, but they will never quit because they can't do any. Like, if they did, they'd have to go to the lowest level of something else, and they would lose all of their benefits. So they're like, okay,
Hmm.
well, I'll just do a fucking half-ass job for the rest of my life, and I'll be protected by the union.
Yeah, literal. I think that happens a lot in feudal societies. You like half-ass priests. Now we just got like half-ass teachers and scientists and everything else. They just all suck.
Yeah, like I would straight up, I want to destroy the teachers union. I don't think teachers should have a union. I really don't. I don't think like I don't want a union. I don't think writers should have a union. I don't think podcasters should have a union. I don't think
They
the
don't. They
police
don't contribute
I don't think the
anything.
police should have a union. I think we should get rid of the police union. Most of the unions that we have, I think, are the ones that are best served for the imperial social capitalism or whatever you want to call it that we have today. Like you have the AFL-CIO, you have the Hollywood Actors Union, the Screen Actors Guild, the Producers Union. We have a lot of unions. Why? Why are those unions good? Like why do those unions benefit anyone? They don't. They benefit capital.
They really did. Ain't changing my life. I don't even like that many movies like that, honestly. So it's like, what's the point?
Like
I'm tired.
at this point, straight up, why do we even need this centralization of media? Like most people are watching YouTube channels now. Like you,
Oh
like
God.
on God, a fucking Comedy Central news joking podcast or whatever, like fucking Trevor Noah's Daily Show. Anyone can do that in their bedrooms now. Anyone can do that in their
And
bedrooms now.
Trevor Noah's not even funny.
And it's like it's good that
Trevor Noah's not even
exactly.
funny.
It's good that we have this competition. It's good that we have like are trying to break up this monopoly and introduce what you could call like a free market in this sense. That's what we want to create is like an actually free market where the market does exist. So it's like if there's a
Uh,
market for or like there's a demand for a comedy news broadcast with a fucking slant in this direction or whatever the fuck. There's a bunch of people competing over that space and that's good. It's good that they're competing over it.
that's why China's beating us out. They compete big
Yeah,
time,
they're all about
and it's not like
competition. Like that's the thing that's so funny.
Mhm.
It's like they want to create a bunch of nano businesses. They want everyone to be like a small business owner who owns like their own means of production, so that they can like refine themselves and like compete in the market, etc., and try to improve what they're doing. It's like it's not like oh we're gonna like and what they do also is like they help out people who are like not doing well in it, right? So it's like okay, you got this person who's like a small farmer or whatever, but they've like all of their gear, all of the shit that they're using is like really out of date and like they're struggling they're like sick because they don't have good access to good health care or whatever, so they go okay we're going to go and we're going to help them acquire, we're going to like give them really good terms on being able to like own newer stuff. We're going to send people from like the agricultural universities out there to teach them how to do a better job of what they're doing. And
So much fucking
and
opportunity.
then we're not going to go send like a fucking consultant or something to be like hey why don't you just sell this to an agro megacorp. We're going to teach them how to do it
Hmm.
for themselves. We're going to give that to them for free. We use the state to go help these people do a better job of their own independent production. That's communism. That's not it's not just like, oh well, maybe all those small farmers shouldn't exist and we should sell it all to there should just be one massive farmers union, one massive farmers union run out of the state and all farms will be governed by this immense bureaucracy. It's like it's a complete destruction
Soviets
of
already tried that. That's why they fell.
exactly. That's why the Soviet Union failed. But you have these people today, right? Like these leftoids, they see the Soviet Union as like a success. Like they want to, like they don't see China as a success, but they see the Soviet Union as a success, even though that's the one that failed. It's
And
interesting that they
yeah,
only like things that
it is
lose.
interesting. And even it's like this, if only the Soviets like did what the Chinese did, that would have been
Well, the thing
big.
is like the problem with the
Like,
Soviets is that they fundamentally had a distrust of like people's ability to locally organize themselves on like the smallest level. Like they didn't believe that like, the peasant was the one who knew the best about his area, right? And like this has happened in like the American electoral system too, where it's like, everyone has an opinion on international geopolitics and national policy, but they don't have that strong of an opinion anymore about how things are working in their local area. But realistically, their
hmm
intelligence is more suited for understanding how things should work in their local area than it is for these much larger issues. So it's like I think we should focus more on having people engaged with their actual immediate fucking present, like their immediate conditions. So what that means is that like you don't just like it's like okay, well if you want to be a small farmer, like you're gonna know your plot of land better than anyone. You're gonna know it because you own it. Like ownership, Matt. That's what like we're not trying to take away ownership from everyone and give it to these like cosmopolitan elites from like the cities who have
we ain't Bill
no
Gates.
who don't touch the grass. They're not touching. They're not there.
Yeah, I end up like despising cities like the older I get.
Well, the problem with cities is
It's
that
really not fun. It's kind of
the reason
depressing.
why cities are depressing and shitty is because most of the people who live there don't own any piece of it. They're barely citizens of it.
Hmm.
They don't. It's not their city.
Exactly.
They're just there.
It's not.
They're renting it. They're visitors in a kind of sense. They're like tourists. They're like perpetual tourists for themselves. If you see those like viral TikToks every once in a while. People act like every day of their life is like they're on like vacation or something or on like a business trip. Like they're perpetual. They're like not rooted to like oh yeah. So I did this and that and this and that. I'm rented this and I went to this like subscription service and I went to this subscription service, etc. But I don't own any of these things. I don't own an apartment here. I'm renting it.
Yeah, that fucking sucks. Like that's why I don't like being in there. Like you could just feel like the stagnation,
Well, it makes sense.
like
It makes sense. If you
especially
don't
in
own a
DC.
thing, then you have no interest in making sure that it's good. Like you only have an interest in like
Mhm.
if like I own like my shit like that I make, which is why I want to make it good. If I was working for someone else's media corporation and all I had to do like it was like, oh, you have to write like, 2 articles a day or whatever and you're getting paid, but like do you think I'd put as much effort and care into like every single thing I do? Like no, I'd be trying to crank it out more efficiently because I'd be trying to game the fucking system. Like I would have less ownership of what I'm doing, even like spiritually. I'd be like, yeah, this isn't like really like maybe I don't agree with this article I'm writing, but I'm getting paid. That's like the BuzzFeed
And
workers, et cetera, like all these people who work for these major things. It's like, well, why don't you just go out and become like an independent writer? Like you can, like you have all the means and ability to do that. The reason why is because they can't. They're not producing anything good enough to accrue enough social market capital or whatever, a name for themselves, you might say, so that they could actually afford to do that. They're like, well, I know that if I had to rely on the patronage of just random people who are convinced that what I'm doing is valuable, I wouldn't be able to do it. But I can like contract off of like people who just go to BuzzFeed because they trust this corporate name or whatever. I can ride that coattail. I can grift off of that and write for this for forever because I'm not the one driving traffic to me. Like I'm like, how do I drive traffic to me? How does anyone ever find out about me? How does anyone read my shit? Because they encounter it from my efforts or from word of mouth.
it's so it's extremely weird that like honestly seem like the US elite just they just want to hold the monopoly like and that's not gonna last. We're gonna get beat out.
Like in some ways,
And
like
I'm
it would
just
be
like
in some ways it would be better if it was all just monopolized because then it would be easier to break up, obviously. The real problem is that we don't have like even a specific monopoly. Like you know how much better things would be if we had like as a streaming service there was one website where all of the content
with
was.
everything on
Yeah,
it.
with everything on it.
That would be
That would be
amazing.
great, but we don't
I
have
wouldn't
that.
have to
We
go
have an
to
oligopoly. We have like all of these various streaming services. That's actually what like the latest like South Park special is about. Really, is about this oligopolization of streaming services and like how it actually
I've
destroys
noticed it
competition.
too. I noticed it too, and it's like there's a bunch of mergers going on. I think like Hulu and Disney Plus that end up merging together. And it's like I don't even pay for like streaming services anyway. I'd be like, I just look for new free shit to get on.
I'm literally back. I'm literally gone back to it's the year 2009. I've gone back to the pre-streaming ecology. I have a Plex server now, and I just torrent shit. Like fuck subscribing to anything. Like we gave it a shot. We clearly can't do it in a way that's actually beneficial or better than what came before it. It's like obviously worse. I read like like if you're like, oh, I
Yeah, I
want to
started
watch.
torrenting too.
You can't just watch anything anywhere. You can't just go like it's like okay, well I'll just go back to torrenting because guess where everything is? It's on the pirate bay. Like everything's on uTorrent, everything's on SoulSeek. Like I don't need like if I want to reliably find the content that I want to see, I'm not going to do that through these streaming services. That's like the real I'm like a pirate communist now. Oh shit! All right, I'm gonna drop you cash, but it's been nice talking to you. Got other people lining up. Can pop in if you want to talk, but I think I'm gonna go off about this for a sec. We want like a free market in things like media. We want the freest market possible in things like media. Like, can you imagine this is like the dream of like the soc dems is like they really like the Soviet style where it's like, oh, you want to write a book? Well, did you get approved by the book writers union? Like, did you get a pass? Did you has it been certified? Has it gone through the imperial censor? Has it gone through like this whole process of certification that it's like actually okay for people to read or whatever? It's like that's like what people want to do. They want to have like content review, et cetera, stuff like this perpetually because the idea of like a free market of content is like very terrifying to them. A free market of content means that like if I write a book and I put it out, then I can just put out whatever book I want. I don't need to like have it edited or to go through this approval process or I can just put out whatever I feel like putting out. That's a free market is like when you can freely put out what you want to put out. You don't need to like go get a certification. You don't need to get an okay from this union and that union and this union and that union. You just like can produce freely. You can't really produce freely. Like there's a good Bob Dylan song that he wrote back in the 90s when NAFTA was going through called Union Sundown. And he said, like, in the future, you won't be like, I'm looking, there's going to be a day when they won't let you grow vegetables in your own yard because maybe you're not doing it right. Maybe you need to you need to have someone come in and from the state to check and certify that you're doing things the right way. Like, there's a balance to these things because obviously we don't want people like, selling poison, but we don't need literally everything to be checked every single time by like five make work position people whose job is like the certification checker. People volunteer to do that anyway. That's the thing, is like in a real market that builds like real intelligence, you have people doing that all the time. So it's like, like, oh, like I'm a book reviewer, like I'm like a very people have confidence in my understanding of what books are good or whatever, or like, they have similar taste to me, so they'll trust my judgment on various things. It's like, old movie reviewers were like that. But like, I feel that way about a lot of people. Like, if someone who I have confidence in their taste or whatever recommends me something, then I'm more likely to check it out than if I get it like, an advertisement for it or something. Unless, like, that's like what all of this marketing is all about, building confidence. It's all about building confidence, and confidence fundamentally is not this objective fact. It's like mediated entirely socially, and it's like one of the most complicated things in the world. That's why they're always trying to like rationalize it through things like upvotes, downvotes. Upvotes, downvotes, like, or consumer feedback, opinion polls, and putting things out like that, instead of just like taking the risk of like putting something out and not knowing whether or not it'll be popular. But like, something like, you have to have a lot of confidence to put something out if it's not immediately viable. You look at like Herman Melville. The market had no confidence in him after he wrote Moby Dick. All the reviewers said it was a shit book, it was garbage, no one should read it, destroyed his book writing career. He was like basically canceled for Moby Dick because people didn't like it, or they didn't get it. But he had enough confidence in himself to have written it and to put it out there, and he knew that it was valuable and that it would acquire a readership someday, and it did. Same thing with William Blake. William Blake, he died pretty poor. He was like penniless. He couldn't afford to get buried in a grave. Uh, his wife couldn't afford to bury him, and he, people would say, is he like, why did he have so much confidence in his work? Like, why was he saying things like so narcissistically and egoistically to say like the work that I'm making is going to last for centuries, while all of these people who are popular right now are going to be forgotten? Well, it turns out he was right. He died a pauper. And he wasn't that popular. Nobody really knew who he was. He was a kind of a fringe guy. He was a weird guy in his own era, but he's one of the most influential writers of all time. That's where, like, the market fails sometimes, but not in eternity. Anyway, I got Trish Step in. What's up?
Hey, have you ever heard of The Chosen?
The Chosen? No.
It's a TV show. That streaming service you're talking about that's like commonly owned. It exists. It's called Angel Studios. It's completely crowdfunded. It's a TV show. It's about Jesus. It's called The Chosen.
Oh, so it's like, yeah. I mean, the thing is though, is that there's like myriad competing streaming services like that, right? None of them have really acquired any large enough position such that they can fund like the types of
Uh,
things that these major media corps can fund.
no, but The Chosen is like the highest crowdfunded show of all time.
Is it better than Video Game High School, which was also crowdfunded?
It's better than it's literally. I think it's. I don't. I'm not well read at all. Like, but I'm pretty sure what it is like attempting to do what you were trying to do.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
almost there.
I think there's like a lot of demand for stuff like that. There are people doing that. Ironically, it comes from like that, right? Like, that sounds like it's probably more in like the MAGA circuit, right? Or like more in like the evangelical circuit. Or like,
It's okay. I wouldn't call it MAGA, but it's from like evangelicals who are
yeah,
very much like sola scriptura. They're not like they're basically trying to construct like the story of the gospels with like through the perspective of the people who of the disciples who followed him. And I'm not an evangelical, I'm actually a Pentecostal. Well, that's what I think I am. I'm, working it out right now. I'm
yeah.
black. I was just at the DMV. I, I, yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, that's one thing that's interesting to me, is like the parallels in like the 20th century, like late 20th century, between like this like evangelical circuit of like alternative media. Like, they also had their own alt media, right? Like you had like things like fucking Veggie Tales competing with like, the larger corporate cartoons or whatever. Like the Prince of Egypt, for instance, is a really great cartoon that
Yeah,
was like competing with like Disney animated features at the same time. There's and it was like from that perspective. It was from like a very strong like Christian evangelical perspective. So like there is a lot of demand from a lot of different audiences, a lot of different demographics, you could say, for this type of like, you could say like they feel like they have more confidence in it, or like they're more ownership over it, and over it than like a major broadcasting corporation. Like they have more of an ability, like their feedback is more immediately heard or whatever in a positive sense than in the like from I don't know, Time Warner or like Disney. Like Disney doesn't give a fuck about people's complaints anymore, you know? Like these days it's amazing. It's amazing the confidence these major corporations have, where like if they put out a something that they're expecting to do really well and then it doesn't do well, they'll like chide the audience and the consumer for like not consuming it. Like they put out that bromantic comedy like in the Judd Apatow model recently, which totally tanked and didn't have any money because no one wanted to watch it. And they're like, "Oh, this is just evidence that like audiences are bigoted." And it's like, well, maybe like you're just making shit that no one wants. Is that possible? Like they don't even believe it. Like they believe that their job is to like tell people what they ought to want and to like force them as much as possible to like like that they're like you see what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like I'm all in favor of shit like that, man. Like yeah, if I'm in favor of people doing more experimentation in media and things like that. Make things for yourself. Like if you don't see a good TV show and like you don't like the TV shows that are on, you have an idea for it, then make it. Like make it like janky. Make it in what with whatever means you have available, and try to accrue capital such that you can make better. You can iterate on it and make it better. I mean, that's what pretty much every content creator on the internet does. Is they start off with like a very limited amount of tools. And if there's any sort of inkling, any sort of hint of something good in there, and it acquires enough audience, even though it's not as polished or whatever as like major broadcasts, then you can accumulate capital and iterate on it, and you can do a better and better job. And then you accumulate more of an audience, and you do better and better. It's like that for almost everything. You have to actually like go do the real work in the sense of like actually trying to like produce outcompete these major corporations with your limited means of production. But more and more, I think people are capable of doing that. In fact, like really, what the major corporations are trying to do now is to just like whenever they see something big or trending in like the underground or like the independent scene, like a SoundCloud rapper going off or whatever, they immediately just try to like monopolize, like pay them, like essentially bribe them so that they can own all of their future production and the things that they made in the past. Just get like an immediate cash payout. So like there's a whole struggle like that in the music industry. It's like, oh hey, we can blow up your songs even more because we have access to all this marketing and things, all of this whole platform you don't have. But the people I've always respected more is someone like Bones or like Lil Ugly Mane or like Space Ghost Perp, these kind of like underground rappers who make all of their money by from their audiences by producing their own shit. Like they don't take label deals because they are more free to not, and like you don't start off with a huge audience, but if you keep making good things, you can eventually make that into a sustainable platform for yourself. Like if you keep producing quality things, like if you build it, they will come in that sense.
yeah. I really think you should watch that show. I think you'd
I
enjoy it.
might check it out. I might check it out. There's always like there's a million things on my list of things to watch, but I'll add that on there for sure. It sounds interesting. I'm mostly interested. I'm probably more interested in their like business model than I am in their content in this respect. But I'll check it out for sure. I can see how it would be good.
Yeah,
It sounds sort of like yeah. I mean, like we could like why aren't we making like movies like that? You know what I mean? Like I feel like there's actually
they're making another. They're also making a show called Testament, which is like a futuristic version of the Acts of the Apostles, and they're making a lot of shit.
yeah. It's literally like
And
the
then
idea of like a cyberpunk act like adaptation of the Book of Acts is like the most MAGA communism thing I can imagine.
it's literally they're making it. Like I think it already came
That
out.
rocks. I love that. So, like like I love that. I think everything's going swimmingly. I feel like in some senses, like I feel like like it's all coming together. Like I don't have to make that because other people like I just observe it.
I want to. I I started going to therapy, like actual therapy. Um, I know you probably wouldn't think it was like a
Well,
good.
a lot of it is just kind of like common sense. Like a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy will give you like pretty solid tips on like how like
Yeah,
emotional management and things.
yeah. I mean, listen. I grew up in an interesting part of the country, so you know, I like hearing perspectives from a lot of different people, and like I don't know where I live. I'm a city guy, so
Hmm.
um, you know, uh,
I want you to own your block, dude. That's what I want for you. I want you and all the
uh,
people you grew up with to own the houses you grew up in.
yeah. I mean, see, here's the thing. Um, where I live actually, there's like a bunch of it has an interesting history.
Hmm.
There's like a there's like uh you know I don't know if it's like haunted or something, but there's like
Oh, dude, I got haunted houses where I'm here or around here, dude. Like we got really old shit. People definitely believe in haunted houses here.
yeah. It's actually like you know why it's like an immigrant neighborhood, and like we used to have like Jews who lived here, and like I don't know. So all of our stuff is like looks Jewish. Like there's like Jewish stuff all over our what is it? Our block and everything, because like the houses used to be owned by Jews. So
Would you mind like saying what city you're from, or do you? I don't really care if you don't feel like it.
I'm from Queens. I'm from
Oh yeah,
Queens.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. That's sort of like from like
Yeah, when the block came in, they left, and then like there's like a bunch of I saw like there were like books where they were writing about like how they kind of regret leaving because they only left because like of racism, and like they basically thought like they were convinced that like there was like it was almost like there was a like a weird like like fucking warriors thing going on. I'm pretty young, so I don't know much about that time,
it's like
but
70s probably,
like
70s New York.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, around 70s, yeah. There's like a whole struggle with the immigrants coming in, and then the Jews left. So, but I think they might come back eventually. I don't know. It'll be nice. I like Jews, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like that's like the 70s New York is like really rough. I mean, you had like fucking Robert Moses and shit just completely demolishing
Yeah,
like kind of specifically trying to like demolish like working class communities and things and trying to like basically lumpenize. Like, that's like where you get all the housing development projects which are really just like these like eugenic social engineering things like those huge projects up like north of Harlem or whatever that you can see when you're like driving in stuff like that. And like, they didn't let the people who live there own any of the things. And so then it becomes this like nightmare of like them being like rentiers to the state or like, these real estate development corporations as their landlords, which aren't that responsive to their concerns. And so then they have like living in a place where nobody owns anything that they actually live within. And then they're like constantly policed and like, you got drugs being pumped into it. It's pretty bad, it's like a recipe for disaster.
it's pretty yeah. Dude, like the places like they change every day. Like all the real estate where I live. I don't know anything about real estate, but like um I don't know who owns everything around here, but like it's like a weird I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's what's been happening as of late is you have these like massive real estate management corporations like Berkshire Hathaway or like Blackstone or Vanguard, et cetera. They buy up all of these houses and things in order to collect rents on them for eternity or or apartment buildings, et cetera. And then it's like managed by like middle managers who are like like oh like you're managing these three buildings, and so then they have to like they subcontract out, et cetera, et cetera. And no one really has like proper like skin in the game, as Taleb would say. Like if you have like worst case scenario, if you have a landlord, like an actual landlord, you want them to live as close to you as possible and to be as much like a neighbor as possible. And that like the best landlord I ever had was in Texas when I was renting this house that this family, this Hispanic family had bought. next door to them that they were renting out. And if I had any problems, they'd be right over it. And like, they were nice because they were like, they wanted the house to remain nice. And so like they were pretty responsive. But then whenever I've lived in a building that's like managed by, a large corporation or something, they're not nearly as responsive, and they don't nearly care nearly as much about like the quality of the place you're living in because they're going to collect rent on it either way.
True.
But they were like, I don't think it's great to have people like, investing in real estate as like, as a means of like accumulating capital like when they're not living in it. Like I don't really believe in like absentee landlording, or I don't think you should be allowed like to own houses that you don't live in. If that makes sense. Like I don't really, but like, I'm not a fan of like people owning vacation houses or whatever.
What do you think of trading?
What do you mean?
What do you think of day trading?
Day trading? I mean, I don't know. I've done some day trading. I don't know. It's like these days, it's you're not making too much day trading right now in these conditions. But I don't know. I don't see anything wrong really with it, like in these conditions. If people are doing that, everyone else is day trading. I think like you can't really trust the markets in general because we're in this like perpetual crisis. Like the stock market's in fucking free fall, in at least still today, continually. So like if you can't really outcompete the market most of the time unless you have some sort of like insider knowledge or something, or you're like pulling a grift of some sort, like a side, like if you're like the guy who owns like the cryptocurrency scam, then like that's great for you. But if you're like investing in all of these things, you're probably gonna get screwed. The same sort of true with like like let's say you're the bank who owns the like investment vehicle that you're selling to other people, like you're always going to be fine because you're too big to fail and the state will bail you out and your job's pretty secure. But if you're investing in those things, then you're totally beholden to the market. But we're all beholden to, the market. So there's really no escape. There's no safe investments right now. But if you can make money, you
Yeah,
should
that's
make
why.
money. I don't know. Like, in some ways, like day trading is kind of like playing blackjack, where it feels like you're taking money from the house, but you're actually just taking money from the people who are less good at playing the game next to you. That's all that's really happening.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was kind of concerned about that. That's what I was kind of concerned about. I was like,
Yeah, you're not
looking,
defeating capitalism by day trading. Like like
yeah,
you're not screwing the banks by day trading, but you are like in a kind of more opaque way screwing out some other day traders who are didn't make as good of bets, and like it's just another form of gambling.
yeah. Well, I don't want to gamble, so
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's really hard to suggest like what's like a good thing to be doing because like we're managed by like sociopaths who are like purposefully running shit into the ground all the time because that's I don't know. Marx explains this all the time. Like we're in the perpetual crisis. So I don't know. I think the best thing you can do is try to do something like produce like an actual good of some sort, even if it's more difficult than speculating. And you can make a lot of money if you take all your savings, you put it all in black, at the wheel, like you have a 50-50 shot of winning a ton of money. But it's not, that's like ultimately it would be better if instead of gambling it, you like tried to make something, try to make it make more money by investing it into something that you were working on, like it's better to invest in yourself, I think. It's better to invest in like your own production than it is to invest in other people's productions. I guess it's good if you have enough capital that you can invest in other people's productions. That's good too.
yeah,
But I don't know. It's been nice talking to you, man. I'm gonna
that
go
makes
go on to the next person though.
yeah, 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 no
Peace out,
problem.
man. All right, Space LaRouche, what up? Howdy.
How are you doing, Logo? You doing good?
I'm pretty good, man. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Looking out at my backyard here. It's pretty nice.
Great, great. I was agreeing with what you were saying about, well, grifting, but not really. What are some tips you have, man? What are some tips you have for grifting? And we have this upcoming October 15th conference,
I'm
and
probably not gonna make it to that because I'm not really like I've gone to enough I'm not really like a conference guy. I'm sticking out here in the woods for a spell. But for if you for by grifting you mean like acquiring social capital in the market on the internet, so you can get more attention on what you're saying, etc. Then obviously the best thing you can do is to create controversies. controversies draw people's eyes to you like nothing else. I'm a great controversialist. Like I create controversies all the time, you know. I become like the protagonist of the timeline where everyone has a take on my take, and people are, you know, creating their opinions opposed or supporting me, and that's ultimately the best way of accruing these sorts of things is by like creating some type of spectacle in that sense. I think that it can be educative. It can also be a complete distraction. I try to make the controversies that I try to like will into being or something on the internet. I try to make them educative or to have them serve some like purpose of teaching a lesson on their own. So, like for instance, the Starbucks barista discourse. I think that is a great example of a controversy that can elucidate a lot of things. You can see how people respond to it and talk about it, and it reveals things about like the actual state of political economy today in this like system of like bastard feudalism and like neo corporate rentierism, etc. And like revealing the fact that the like you know Starbucks is actually a bank. It's not really a coffee shop. It's a bank that owns coffee shops and you know provides certificates of deposits for you know coffee and things like that. They literally manage it like a bank. It's interesting also to like reveal things like, well, when you apply to be a barista, you're not actually applying to be a barista. You're applying to be a coffee artist, and you're not being paid out of the terms of production from the Starbucks corporate enterprise. You're being paid out from retail, and having retail and production being split up on the accounting books of this corporate enterprise is a real political economic like reality, and it like actually is how class is formed is by the way things are paid out in these sort of enterprises. That's like where class comes from. You know, if you're a manager, if you're a CEO of Starbucks, you're getting paid out from a different fund in different ways than if you were a retail worker, and also if you're a production worker, and also if you're like one of the contract workers that they supply. You know, like the people moving the truck, like moving their goods and trucks and things like that. All of these things are paid out differently in the books, and that is really like the site of where class is formed is like payouts. So I think that was a good controversy to create. It obviously brought a lot of attention to me, brought a lot of attention to other people too, who were like, you know, wow, look at this guy who's an idiot, etc. But the more people react to it negatively, also, the more that they're spreading it to people in myriad forms. They're kind of advertising like Marshall McLuhan said, like, you know, my producers aren't like my consumers, aren't they also my producers? Where it's like these people like by reacting to things that you do, etc. Like when you create like controversy or whatever, they're also spreading like potentially thoughts beyond their like their ability to hermeneutically control or confine. So there are a lot of times where people will be like, you know, quote tweeting me to dunk on me, but then people their replies will be like, I don't know, he seems kind of right here. Even if they hate me, they'll be like, I don't know, at this particular point he seems kind of right, and then they'll have a whole discourse amongst themselves over that. So it's like I think that that's the best way of going about things, and really all you have to do that is to like have strong opinions that you have confidence in that are and you don't even have to try to really create controversy. You don't have to like make a plan to create a controversy. I find myself embroiled in controversy just for saying things that I think are like common sense or that just make sense or like are true. So I don't know. I don't really have like I'm not like a marketing wizard guru or whatever. I've literally just been doing this like you know every day or like most days of the week for enough years that it's like I already have enough of an audience that like things I say are like or write already like have some type of purchase or like other people see them as having some type of purchase, and that's where you get the types of replies that are like, how the hell does this guy have 20,000 followers, or like why does this guy shouldn't have this many followers or things like that, because like you know they're pissed off that like I already have acquired like at least some confidence in the people that in the things that I'm saying. So I don't know. I don't really have like great advice. I would just say, you know, be productive,
Well,
create good
the
things.
one thing that the one thing that I sometimes worry about, I know you've read Plato, so you've read Gorgias,
Yeah.
and I I sometimes wonder how is the best way not to just because you said you know you have to generate controversy, and it seems a lot of times on the internet to even get eyeballs on you, you almost have to engage in rhetoric, and I'm
Well,
just wondering,
look at
how do you
Socrates.
get an engagement while still putting people
Look at Socrates. What did
into a
Socrates do?
position to discover
So
ideas?
what did Socrates do? It still works. Socratic irony still works. It's still as effective as it was then as it is now. What did Socrates do? Did he have like a big corporation? Did he have a big school or whatever? No, he went down to the market. He just talked to people and he asked them questions. And that enough was alone to create a massive controversy to the point, where it took his life. Right. All he did was went and he asked people questions about their stated beliefs and like introduced like conceptions or trying to like you know what I mean, trying to make them make sense in their entirety. So he'd be like, okay, what do you mean? But what is justice? He would ask someone, and I'd have a conversation about what is justice, and he would show that like their definition of justice like collapsed in on itself. So I do that a lot, like people, like I ask people like, well, okay, so like asking a question like this: is a CIA agent a proletarian? Asking someone that question, like because they don't own their means of production, they don't own the CIA. They get a wage. They're working for a corporate. You know what I mean? So it's like that. So then their ability, like asking these types of questions, these types of Socratic inquiries, this pisses people off like nothing in the whole world, man. This is the most controversial thing to do is to ask people to justify the shit that they say. It's that simple. Socrates did it back then. I'm in the same tradition as Socrates. I love Socrates. I'm like, if I was a rhetorician, then I wouldn't be asking people questions like that or asking them to defend themselves. I would just like gesture towards some sort of authority. And you see a lot of people do stuff like this where they go, well, like for instance, I asked someone, I was like describing communism or like the end goal of communism in a type of verbiage that would be more amenable to people of like a classical economic, like libertarian Ron Paul bent. For instance, I was saying communism is the maximally efficient allocation of the most goods possible, right? The maximally efficient allocation of the most goods possible. Now, did Marx literally use those exact words? Did Lenin or Stalin or anyone use that exact same phrase? No. It's something that I've like. It's a description of the same sort of thing. There's a million. There's people have proffered millions of descriptions of things like this. That is one description I put out there, and someone goes, "That isn't literally this." And I said, "Why isn't it?" Like they went, "Oh no, communism is a classless, stateless society without the commodity form, etc." They took the verbatim, supposedly authoritative, singular definition of this from a particular person that they cite as an authority. And they go, no, it's this. And I go, how are these two descriptions not of the same thing? Right. So I'm asking them that Socratic question, like, how is this like not what I'm saying? And then they can't answer it because I think, they're not providing a satisfactory answer that I have any confidence in. It's literally like you just got to
Okay.
ask. Like, it's Socratic inquiry is still like the most powerful tool in the whole world. Like, not only that, but I think the even more powerful than just Socratic inquiry, like a more as opposed to like that sort of basic negative stance, is I think the power of like Scripture and Revelation, because I think that stuff like it makes like positive assertions, and people who have like faith or confidence in say the Scriptures, take it on that level of like having that type of it's a type of authority beyond like that is similar but beyond the authority. Like some people treat Marx like scripture, like Marx is my scripture, so capital is my Bible or whatever. There's some people like that. I think that's a little one-sided perhaps, but if it's like, well, Jesus says the meek shall inherit the earth, you would disagree with that. You know what I mean? To a Christian, they cannot, because it's written there. Like that's like the good thing about the Christian discourse, and like why a lot of the evangelicals have conformed this type of kind of a singular class consciousness, even is because they're all reading they all cite the same authorities. So like when you're not with someone who's citing the same authorities, someone who's like, well, the Bible's a bunch of bullshit and I don't care and it doesn't mean anything, it's all made up and it's all about justifying genocide or whatever the hell they say about it, then citing that isn't going to be doing much for you because they don't see that as an authority. So what you can do though is you can use all of their authorities against them, or you try to, like, if they're like, oh no, my authority is this, my authority is this particular writer in this particular description, then you can have endless inquiries as to like why that one and not this one or that other one, or and then eventually you're actually discussing the substance of the matter, like the real essential thing, which is like, does this accurately describe reality or not? At the end of the day, is this an accurate description or not? Is this real or no? Is this real or is this not real? Does this describe reality or does it not describe reality? At the end of the day, that's what we're arguing about in speech all of the time. Is my description of reality sufficient, or is your description of reality sufficient? Does my description of reality contain yours within it? Like if I'm like, well, I can explain why you think that, right? And like I'm trying to say that my description of reality even can explain your misunderstanding or something like that, and that's like the theory of ideology, is being like, well, actually, your description of reality is biased by these factors, like because you have this role in the economy, and this is serving your interests in this way or whatever. It's like at the end of the day, how you accrue confidence in this sense is by doing this over and over and over and over again. That's what all writers, philosophers, people who are engaged in discourse and dialectics do. If you're good at it, then you get better at it. Some people, it's like, I don't know, I feel like there are people with different talents. Some people are like, they're not good at arguing their points or their perspective. They're not, but that doesn't mean that they're not right too. There's some people who have like really good descriptions of reality, but they're not as skilled or trained in the means of like justifying those things. They just kind of like have faith in them. And I don't think that's always bad. There's some people who are like, if they're like, listen, man, it's all rigged. Like the elections are rigged. The elites are screwing us, like the Fed, etc. Like those people are on point, but other people might roll their eyes at them because it's like, yeah, but they don't have like a perfectly theoretical description of like why that is the case. But so I don't know. Anyway. I'm rambling.
Yeah, well, thank you, Logo. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too, man.
Answers my questions.
All
Yeah,
right,
thanks.
man.
Bye.
All right, we got Seth. What's up, Seth? Yeah, I heard you. What up?
Hey, so I kind of wanted to debate with you about something. So I just ran across your thread, or one of your random threads. I know you've got a million of them, and you're like super anti, like transhumanist. Why is that?
Well, it depends on what your definition of transhumanism is. For instance, like I'm a fan of like one of the early transhumanists, Nikolai Fedorov, who described transhumanism as effectively the creation of like the New Jerusalem, right? The idea that like ideally we want to like eliminate like death, like we want everyone to like live long, healthy lives, and even more ideally, if it were possible and we had the technology, we would like to resurrect all of the people who have ever been dead, all the people who have ever been dead into eternal life, bring them back, colonize the entire universe, and create like an infinite kingdom of perpetual peace and plenty. So it's like, is that the type of transhumanism that I'm opposed to? No, that's the type of transhumanism I support. But there's some type of transhumanism where it's like the human is what needs to be destroyed, and we need to like upload our consciousness into like this AI robot being, like this type of like silicon based entity, which is going to replace humanity, eliminate humanity, and like as if we're like giving birth to a new race of creatures, and that is our historical job, is to outmode ourselves and like create the thing that abolishes all of humanity. That's the type of transhumanism I'm opposed to.
Okay, yeah, I'm probably sort of in between both of those points of views, I guess. I don't think it's actually possible to outmode humanity. I don't even think it's possible.
Yeah, I don't either.
But I do think that a lot of like Christians in particular like cut transhumanism off completely, which I think is like cutting off progress.
Do you want to know what breed of Christians are the most open-minded to transhumanism in general, and actually FUDs of transhumanism and research, etc.? They have their own transhumanism like fucking institutions and conferences and things. It's the Mormons. The Mormons
Yeah,
are
yeah, it is Mormons. I've talked to Mormons that way. Yeah, I've talked to a transhumanist Mormon before. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
because
kind of weird.
well, it actually makes perfect sense because in Mormonism, they believe that we are going to accomplish the like kingdom of heaven through technological means, like through work. That's like in their theology. So it's like they're a works based theology, in the sense that like you do your work for the church, like in the temple, you like provide the money to like the Zion Bank, etc. You like get your recognition in the temple, and it's like it's kind of Masonic in that sense, where it's like the higher up you are in this chain of like being a good Mormon, the more you will be rewarded in the afterlife. They have like multiple planes of celestial paradise, which you can inherit depending on your works.
Yeah, sounds pretty not that bad actually. I kind of agree with it. Maybe I should be a Mormon or something.
Maybe
But
I kind of disagree, because I'm more of like a communist, I guess, because I think that we should like I'm more of like, I aim for universal salvation. I would like everyone to be saved and inherit eternal life. I don't believe in this kind of striation of works-based theology. I'm like a faith-based theologian, so I think that people's faith is what saves them. Their works are like evidences of faith. But I think that, and they say faith without works is dead. But I don't think that like emphasizing works above faith is beneficial.
Okay, but don't you agree? I sort of agree with the Masons in some
In some
sense, the
instances, yeah.
Freemasons.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but didn't they literally build America though? It kind of
No,
proves that like it kind of worked,
there
right?
there weren't.
Like Masons literally.
No, they didn't. There's the people here in New England in the 1600s weren't Freemasons.
But weren't a lot of the founding fathers
That's
Freemasons?
over 100 years later.
Okay, so but George, I mean, like, oh, I see what you're saying. So you're saying like the 17th century, maybe.
Yeah. I think what really built this country is like sort of, you could say it's like earlier, like, well, really like masonry or like masons in general were a huge part of the economy in the Middle Ages in general, like these sort of like trade guilds and things like that. Like, like let's say you're a really good stone cutter, and no one was building a cathedral around you, like you just finished like work building like some of these buildings because you were contracted out to do through your masons guild. Like back in the day, you could travel around, and this sort of Masons Guild would look after each other. It's like, hey, I'm a stone cutter, and they'd be like, oh, cool, yeah, we're working on this thing. We can give you a job. So the idea was like it was like they were kind of like a jobs program in the sense of like being able to connect talented, like skilled workers with projects. That's like what the early, like where all of this ultimately comes from, is that it's like a type of social network, right? It's like a social capital. They were accruing social capital, and you could be a part. So there's a lot of things that the Masons did that were good. Like it's much more complicated considering there's like the operative masons. That's more of like the operative masons, the people who are actually like doing real work in the form of masonry in the sense of like cutting stone and creating blueprint. And then there were the speculative masons who were more like the project managers, who were the ones who would like plan these projects, etc. But then later, as time goes on, there's like more and more of a divide between this. More and more work is like speculative in that sense of being like, well, we're making the world planners, the world builders. Those are like the speculative masons. The masons themselves, like they split and they competed with each other. There are various masonic organizations in the same way that there are various like unions who compete with each other over jobs. So yeah, I mean, I have like a complicated understanding of the Masons because they're like really, really old, and it's like centuries and centuries. So it's like having a complicated relationship with like the churches that represent themselves as Christian. Like there's it's complicated. Everything has like near infinite tensions within it.
What do you think about Albert Pike? I recently read
Not a big fan of Albert
Morals
Pike.
and Dogma.
Not a big fan of Albert Pike. Albert Pike's like Scottish, like old Scottish, right? Masonry.
Yeah.
That's like the Confederate Masons. That's like more of like the British Confederate supporting Masons. I had to pick between the two, like where the Civil War is kind of like a Masonic Civil War. Like I'm closer ideologically, I suppose, to like the free and accepted Masons. But again, they were like more of like the Union, like the Union guys in this sort of Masonic Civil War. The Pike people, they go out to California, right? And that's like really the origin of a lot of like eugenics and things like that. They reify like natural law and not so much revelation. They care way more about like the God of this world, like the God of nature, as they describe it, being like the ultimate hegemon and the person you should be in accord to. And that's sort of like where you get like the eugenics ultimately. Eugenics is the exact same thing. It's like the worship of the God of this world, i.e., natural law, i.e., like this gets conflated with like Malthusian theories of population, et cetera, et cetera. The survival of the fittest is sort of the Scottish Rite. The Scottish Rite is also like the
Yeah.
basis of like the KKK and things like that.
Yeah, I'm from the South, so it's like it was like kind of more popular.
Yeah.
In certain areas. But okay, I mean, but like my main disagreement with like Christians in general is that like I feel like Christians cut off everything as like satanic, but they don't have like a fundamental understanding of said things. Like you seem to be really really educated in a lot of these things. But
Yeah, they kind of have
like most Christians
they have
are.
a kind of superstitious one-sidedness, definitely. If you're talking about like mainline like evangelical prots and like even like other like I don't know, a lot of people have a sort of one-sidedness to it, where it's like they don't love their enemy in a way too, in that sense. But they're like there's a great thing that I like to bring up. Like I watched this little documentary on the Satanic Church, like the Church of Satan here. And I'm not a big fan of them at all. I don't really like them at all. But there was an interesting thing where, like, there were these Christians like protesting their building of some like statue of Lucifer or whatever, and the Satanists were like, "Aren't you supposed to like love your enemies?" And they were like, "No." And it's like, okay, like you know what I mean? Like they're like I don't think like just because someone calls themselves a Christian or like presents themselves as such that they get the authority of like actually just like representing Christ on earth. I don't think that's how it works. Like you judge by the fruits. Like they're obviously not behaving as Christ would. Like Christ prayed for his enemies. He didn't go like you know what I mean. Like there's a lot of demonic forces in the world. There's a lot of like witchcraft and divination and these sorts of things are become pretty popular. And there's always been a complicated relationship between the churches and various guises and these types of things because there are actually like biblically sanctioned forms of divination. They have like the casting of lots and things. There's a lot to do with that, or like astrology. You have to have a complicated role, like the biblical hermeneutic as to like the exact how much do the stars determine fate. That's really a question of like how much do these sort of natural conditions that you're born into determine who you are, and like how much freedom do you really have? Is everything really written and predetermined in the stars? And questions of like double predestination and things like that. Someone like John Winthrop Jr., for instance, John Winthrop's son, he was the one at the Salem witchcraft trials who was like, listen, these people aren't even really witches. I know this because I'm an alchemist and I have like a very vast erudition in this esoteric literature, right? So these people are actually like, he's closer to being like, these people aren't like practicing occultists. They're just like mentally ill. That's like sort of what his defense was in the witch trials in Connecticut. So he would get a lot of them off for being like sentenced to death for witchcraft or whatever, because he's like, listen, they're not even doing like real witchcraft. I know what real witchcraft is. So there's like the traditions of like the positive uses of these sorts of suspicious things, and then there's the traditions of like nefarious uses of these things, the right hand path and the left hand path.
Well, I think that's what kind of turns me off of Christianity, to be honest, is that like 95, I think like 95, easily like 95% of so-called Christians aren't even really Christian. And
Maybe.
so if that's like the case, then like what's the point? Like then that means that there's like an elite of like actual spiritual like people that actually understand the scripture and whatnot.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know what I mean?
well, there's well, the thing is like Christianity to me is important, not because like I'm a member of a specific church and like informs like I go to the cookouts and it informs my social role in the world. It's really like the poetry, the scripture, the revelation of it, like the science of it, you could even say. That's what's important to me. It's helped me understand the world. And I do like, I have faith. Like I legitimately have faith in that. So it's not to me the same type of question. Like a lot of Christians don't think I'm a Christian, or would say that I'm not one, or would call me a heretic of XYZ sort, especially the Catholics. They love to tell me that I'm a heretic because I'm like, yeah, Pelagius was right. I think Augustine was wrong. They're like, oh, well, then you're not a Christian. So I don't know if like it's like if it's worthwhile to like be like bigoted against Christians in general and be like, oh, they're all fake or something. I think there's like reasons to feel that way, but I don't think it's like a very charitable perspective or it's like that useful. I think it's much better if you is to be a better Christian. If you think that these Christians aren't being a Christian enough, then you should do what your forefathers did, because we have these great awakenings all the time where they'd say, "Hey, you're supposed to be Christians, but you guys certainly aren't acting like it," and they'd rile them up and try to inspire them to really engage with the Scripture. And I try to do that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I mean, in a social setting, you kind of have to interact with other Christians, right? So, like, if you're not filtering out the bad Christians, there's no way to like not avoid these people.
Yeah, well,
Like,
you don't want to avoid them. They're people. They're all around you. I encounter people all the time who are very disagree with me on almost everything, and I still try to talk to them. Like I don't know, like I don't think you'd want to just find like some little safe space where everyone agrees with you. I think it's good to like have confrontations and to like actually challenge your understanding of things, and perhaps those people might know something that you don't. Maybe they'll teach you something.
I mean, that's sort of why like Freemasonry kind of is like I entertain it, because like I feel like a high level like 33-degree Mason would probably be capable of understanding my
Well,
point of view.
why do you have
Like,
so what I'm hearing here is that you just like the sort of safety you can find in confidence in credentialed authorities. So it's like, okay, well, that's sort of the same thing where it's like, well, why would I talk about science or like a scientific understanding of things with some random layman? I only want to talk about science with scientists, like who are credentialed authorities in their field. I like talking to everyone about everything. So I'm just like, and I don't really have that much faith either in these like credential authorities. I think there are many cases, and this is a biblical saying, right? That God uses the foolish things to humble the proud and the high and the mighty, etc. So I think there's a lot of cases where like some guy who's not qualified at all, and maybe he's just completely shooting from the hip and has no reason or ability to justify what he's saying, and like something like, yeah, I think these vaccines are sus or something like that, for instance, in like recent times, where all these credentials authorities are saying like, whoa, no, like it's all fine, like if you don't do it, you're a bad person. Like in a lot of cases, the people who have no ability to defend what they're saying, they're just going purely from an intuitional thing in a kind of foolish manner, even end up being right when all these people who have credential authorities and licenses and badges from elite institutions and are ostensibly supposed to be the experts, then they fail. So I don't have faith in the type of thing. I don't have any faith that a 33rd degree Mason would be more educated or more just like by the fact that he's done that than anyone else. I would treat him the same as anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't treat people differently, but I'm saying, like, it makes sense, like, to be a 33rd degree Mason, you would have to sort of move up the ranks, right? Sort of how, like, Albert Pike laid it out. So, like, you would kind of, like, you're kind of, like, proving your
Yeah, but the thing is, right,
intellect and
as
stuff.
I've
So,
already said, I don't agree with Albert Pike. I think he's wrong. So if someone's getting even closer and closer to approximating the 33rd degree level of approximating Albert Pike's philosophy, then I think they're getting further and further away from the truth. So I actually would expect a 33rd degree Mason to be far further away from the truth than someone who hasn't been involved in it at all at this point. Someone who's like,
I don't know.
I don't know, I think it's sus. I wouldn't be a Freemason because I just think it's spooky and sus. I think that person's more right than the 33rd degree Mason.
But they have no reason to say that.
Exactly.
It's just more intuition.
Exactly. They don't what I'm saying is that the truth doesn't always, like, people can give voice to a truth without being able to justify it, and they can still be right.
I guess, but I mean, more than not, they would be wrong, though, right? So if you had like
Well,
a
now
billion
you're
people
talking
that
about speculative. Now you're talking about confidence, levels of confidence, where it's like, okay, well, I don't have this confidence that you're right all the time because like you've been wrong about this, this, and this. There's no way you could be right about this because everything's predetermined by like this sort of pattern. Like, there's no way that you could be right about everything and then wrong about this, or there's no way you could be wrong about everything and then right about this. But I think there's a million times where people are wrong about a lot of things and they happen to be right about something, and they had no means or ability to rationalize why they were right about that. That happens all the time. People will be like, I just have a feeling that this guy's gonna win the. I have a feel like I don't know, like watching football. I have a feeling that the Jets are gonna lose this week, even though the spread says that they're gonna win. I might bet against. There's like, why, and they could be like, well, I just have a feeling. I don't even know why. I'm just gonna roll with it. That happens all the time. There's this idea that you should have that like there's an objective means of acquiring like absolute confidence in your judgments. I just don't think that's true. I think we're always capable of error.
I mean, that's true, but it's different between like football, like a football game, and like the Bible, right? Because the Bible, we're all reading from the
Okay,
same
well,
Bible.
no, we're not. We're not all reading from the same Bible because, like, are you reading it in Greek and Hebrew? Which translation are you reading? Et cetera. There's a million different Bibles. So it's like there's
Yeah, but most of us read the King James version, right? So.
Well, here in America, but actually less and less, dude. Like, you see more of the what is it? They'll have like the revised KJV, or they'll have like the New American Bible. There's new translations coming out all the time. I think that's good. I think it's good that there's constant work and like constant struggle over the meaning of this text. Like, I'm engaged in that myself. Like, I have some like counterintuitive hermeneutical understandings of certain passages that people tell me I'm absolutely wrong about. But I think that's good. I think that is good that we're continually trying to get more out of this text. And sometimes that means being like, I just have a kind of intuition that this is the case, and I can't justify it right now. And maybe you can then work to try to find means of justifying it, or maybe you don't, and maybe you end up being right even though you never justified it. Maybe someone else comes along and they justify your position even though you didn't do it yourself. That happens all the time. I'll give you a good example of this. Is Vladimir Nabokov, the author. He was also an entomologist of butterflies. He studied butterflies at the Harvard Zoological Society or whatever. And he wrote a paper. It was purely speculative. It was based off of his observations of the specific blue butterflies in the Americas, in the big western states like Montana, the Dakotas, etc. And he wrote this whole thing, this speculative, like basically like kind of a story where he imagined himself going in a time machine and seeing the transit of specific waves of these blue butterflies from Siberia, because he was already familiar with these, because he was an entomologist, as like, you know, he studied butterflies his whole life. He was very interested in that as a child. And so he was like, I think they came over in these waves at like these times. And he had no means whatsoever of rationalizing this aside from his own like scientific intuition and his contact with these things. And then years later, decades later, after he's dead, they do genetic studies on these butterflies and they find that he was completely right. And he had no means of justifying himself in his thesis, in his theory at all. But later, future people with better technology, more means to be able to justify these things, were capable of justifying it for him. He turned out to be right when everyone else was wrong.
That's not most Christians, though, right? It's not most Christians that have.
Well, I'm not interested in talking about most or averages. Like, I talk about particulars. You know, to generalize is to be an idiot, as William Blake said.
Yeah, maybe. Well, it's just like, you know, my own experience. The Christians that I've talked to, like the layman Christian, really don't know like what they're talking about in a lot of cases.
I think the layman in general don't know. I think most people don't know what they're talking about most of the time.
But isn't there something wrong with that? Like,
I don't know.
I feel like it's something evil about like using Christianity as like, you know, as like a tool to like, I don't know, like
I agree.
Subjugate people.
No, I agree. I don't think that's how it's like. Obviously, Christianity is supposed to be the liberation of the people.
But like that's what most Christians are doing.
So you keep using terms like most, etc., where it's like, I don't know.
Experience.
Okay, in your experience, but maybe you haven't had that many experiences. Maybe your experiences aren't sufficient.
But I've met Freemasons that seem to more in line understand where I'm coming from.
Okay.
And they kind of, you know, like it seems like they're more educated.
Okay, maybe
on the topic.
Maybe they're also, maybe you're wrong and they're deluded and you don't know how wrong you are yet. Maybe you're getting convinced into a bunch of things that are actually wrong. How would you know?
Well, because I've read and studied the Bible many times.
So is it like we could do this more? It would be more beneficial if we could do a particular point. What do you think most Christians believe about Christianity that the Freemasons you've encountered have disagreed with and are more correct about? Like, what's a particular issue or like understanding or reading of a, like, theologically or however you want to put it?
I think most people seem to get tricked by the appearance of things.
Well, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but it's like kind of satanic, right? Because like, isn't Lucifer supposed to be like the most beautiful angel?
Yeah.
So like people are getting tricked into things because they can't see the truth.
What did Albert Pike write about Lucifer, by the way?
Yeah, I know what he wrote, but like, I know what he wrote, but I mean, there is logic to it. I'm not saying I agree, but like he has a reasoning that he can justify.
Okay, but maybe he's wrong.
Yeah, he might be, but
yeah, maybe he's a Luciferian, and like you're actually getting tricked in the same way that you think those people are getting tricked, and you just don't see it.
I don't know. I mean, is that what you're suggesting, or
I don't know. I would be suggesting that, yeah, because I think Albert Pike is like a Luciferian.
And how did you come to that conclusion? Because
I read Albert Pike.
Yeah,
I read his writings on Lucifer and like, you know, his like kind of equation of Jesus Christ with Lucifer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's bad. I think that's wrong. I think that's a complete misreading of the text. I think that's completely wrong, and I could justify that to you using the text if you'd like.
Yeah, could you? Like,
yeah. So Jesus is the antitype of Lucifer. He's the opposite of Lucifer. They're not the same. They're same in the sense that opposites resemble each other, but they're the exact opposite. They're not the same. They're not in the same. They're not doing the same thing. They're actually completely opposed. They're complete opposites.
Yeah, I agree. My only point is that, like, going back to your question, I just think most Christians just get tricked into things based off appearance.
I feel like you're kind of an elitist. I'm going to be honest with you. I'll shoot from the hip here, but I feel like your thing is that you want to be a member of the spiritual elite and the elect, and the Freemasons provide that sense that you are ascending to some type of elect, divine ordinances that are reserved for the chosen few, right? And notice that I'm using the term few. And like you're saying most, the many are wrong, but the few are correct, right? And I think that's wrong. I think the many in general are correct, and the few are wrong.
But how do you justify that if the many are incorrect all the time, or a lot of the time?
Because you don't take the many as their individual level. You don't go, oh, that because then you're turning the many into the few. For instance, the few Christians that you've encountered, you have taken for the many, right? You've taken your few experiences with the Christians you've encountered and you've extrapolated that to representing the many. And you don't like that many. You don't like those few that you've encountered. So you said most of them are like this, right? But I think that's not, I don't think you can justify that.
I mean, I guess it would come down to like polling and whatever, but
No,
like
it
just
doesn't.
based on.
It doesn't come down to polling because there's a big difference between what people say they believe and what they demonstrate in reality, right? Like for instance, you could be like, yeah, I'm like an Ayn Randian objectivist, and I believe that everyone should have to like you could have your stated beliefs be the complete opposite of your actual practice. I think this happens all the time too. For instance, we're saying like there are some Christians who say I'm like a bastion of like I'm like a one of Christ's servants on earth, and all I do is care for people. But then you look at it, and their Christianity amounts to hating their enemies instead of loving their enemies. And you go, okay, well, they are completely like what they're presenting themselves and what they actually are the complete opposites, right? So like their stated preference and their revealed preference are opposites, and that happens a lot.
So going back to your example of the Christian and the Satanist, you would say that those Christians are not real Christians then?
No, I would say that if you're trying to punish your enemies or you're trying to get vengeance, then you are going against the ordinances of Scripture, where vengeance is God's alone. You leave all vengeance to God. God gets all His revenge on evil every single day in eternity. So your job is not to take vengeance on those people. I think the Church of Satan is wrong and completely stupid and bullshit, and I think it'll disappear in time. I don't think I have to go blow it up, or I don't have to go get into fights with these people or like punch them in the face or whatever, or like go outside of their buildings and chant and yell at them and call them bad people. I don't think that is going to contribute to the destruction of that institution.
Yeah, they seem like they're just like anarchists or whatever. So
What
I
I
don't
think
think.
most of them are is I think most of them are people who grew up in ostensibly Christian backgrounds, right? But they're from people who weren't really demonstrating like Christian charity and virtue. They're from people who are using Christianity in the same exact way. And so they go one-sided, like overcorrection, and they go like they actually try to approximate Christian virtue through its opposite. So they're like, actually, we Satanists here are the real tolerant and accepting and kind people and charitable people, and we care for the poor and et cetera, et cetera. That's what they're doing is like they're trying to like one-sidedly take like be Christians through being the opposite, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Okay, so I guess our fundamental disagreement is that I do think that ultimately there are only a few people that actually read scripture that I think get it to some degree. I think most people say that they get it, or they just I don't know if they're I don't know if they're incapable or they just don't look into it that deeply. But I feel like if you get the wrong answer, like you get the wrong answer, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
you
well,
can't.
well, it's like how do you know what the right answer is the real question. That's what we're talking about. Like what is real? What is the correct description of reality? So yeah, I think a lot of people have incorrect descriptions of reality, and like they don't understand what they're saying, or they know not what they do. I believe Jesus said.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Well,
But I think
maybe
that's
I'll
a.
look.
I don't think like. So what do you do in that stance? Well, you want to help them, right? If you want to help them understand, but first you got to help yourself to understand. Like, are you sure that you understand?
I mean, I'm learning every day, but
Yeah.
I feel like
So are they. So are all these people that you're encountering, and like they don't understand things, and like you understand some things, but you're also learning every day. So the goal is to like work together to have everyone understand more every day.
yeah, but I get like really frustrated, like like these
Yeah,
people are like,
it's tough.
what I mean?
It's hard. You have
Like
to
they don't get
practice
it.
patience.
I
Yeah,
just
I know,
get
but you
really
have to be
frustrated.
patient. You have to be better. You have to be a better. You have to demonstrate more virtue. You have to become good to acquire the mandate of heaven here. Like you can't get frustrated and yell at them. You can't call them mean names and things like that. You have to be a better person. They're gonna like even when they're slandering you and they're calling you names and they say that like you're a Satanist or whatever, and they're calling you a heretic. They call you all these different names, etc. You have to have the patience to be the better person. That's the real important thing. So it's like you're actually being given a trial here. And if you just get frustrated and you give up on these people and you don't keep trying, then you're failing. You failed them. You failed like to be your brother's keeper.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree. Yeah, I mean, getting angry is not smart, but I feel like it's just better to hang out with people that are sort of at your own level. You know what I mean? Like everyone,
I don't think
like
so. I disagree. I think it's good to. I think it's good to be like open to people of all backgrounds and experiences. I don't think it's good to like silo yourself off in a group where it's like, oh, I only talk to people who 100% agree with me. I think it's good to go and like encounter people from myriad perspectives. You know, like I do that all the time. I talk to Christians, I talk to Muslims, I talk to Jews, I talk to atheists, I talk to Marxists, I talk to pretty much everything imaginable. I talk to even subsets of Christians. I know I have friends who are Orthodox. I have friends who are Catholic. I have friends who are Protestant. I have friends who are like esotericists. I have friends who are like Amharic Ethiopian Orthodox. I have friends who are like Syrian Orthodox. I think it's good to like talk to like encounter as many different perspectives and things and worldviews and peoples as possible. If you're really looking to understand as much as you can, you're gonna do better doing that than just like staying in a group where pretty much everyone agrees with each other.
Yeah, it's not that we all necessarily agree. I mean, I do, there are like Muslims I'm friends with, but it's just I feel like we all fundamentally agree, even when we disagree. I feel like a lot of the people, that a lot of the like layman Christians I talk to, like aren't like they're not like they don't have like the capability to understand where I'm coming from. It's
I
kind
don't
of like
think.
the
I
stuff.
think that's when you're saying that they don't have the capability to understand. I think that's a type of judgment that is like a bad type of judgment to have. I think everyone has the capability to understand things. You know, like I think everyone has the capability to understand like things that I'm trying to say. And if they can't, then I might be failing, and I might have to adapt like how I'm communicating it to them, etc. Or maybe I'm like like so. I would say that the proper path is to assume that you are not doing a good enough job as opposed to judging others.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Okay, cool. All right, well, thanks a lot.
For sure, man. Nice talking to you. All right, guys. Anyone else? I think I could do like one or two more. Anyone else got anything? Woo. Ugh. I wonder, can you hear this if I play my guitar with AirPods? All right, Chang, how you doing, bud? What do you want to talk about? Yeah, what's up?
I guess I only had like one small thought. Whenever you're saying how like yeah like to be patient because in love covers like a multitude of sins, and that's one of love is patient. Uh, it
Yeah,
made me
love
think
is
of
kind.
do you know John Murray Straub?
I've heard the name like Trop, but I don't think I've read or like I don't know who what. No, so not that
Oh
familiar.
yeah, he's like a Marxist filmmaker. He
Oh, right. Yeah. I thought, yeah, so he's in film.
like he made Moses and Aaron. He's like a gene. He's like he used to make films with his wife. But until she like she passed away. I think their best work might be Moses and Aaron, and I also like the one he did with after she passed called Artemis's Knee. Uh, but
What era was he?
sorry, can you say that one more time?
What era of film was this? Like, how is this recent or like a while ago?
Well, Artemis's Knee. Yeah, I think it's like fairly recent. Moses and Aaron kind of was in the 70s. Like John Murray Straub, he's still making films. He's like a contemporary of
Oh, nice.
Godard. I guess like Pasolini, like Bresson. Like that's kind of people who you'd kind of associate him with.
Word.
Uh,
I haven't seen any of his movies, but I probably should.
yeah, yeah. I think they'd be up your alley. But
The thing with movies like that for me, man, is that like I have a hard time watching movies by myself. So I always want to watch like with someone else or like with other people. Like I hate watching things by myself.
mhm.
So, but then I have to convince other people to watch these things.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
that's like very difficult. Like I'm always like, hey, who wants to watch like Tarkovsky's like these like kind of like older like art films or whatever. And like a lot of people are like very averse to it, or like they get bored by it. So it's hard for me to find time to like on my own watch a movie like just by myself. I always feel like kind of like antsy about it. I'm always like want to talk about like things that I guess that's why I'm here in the first place. Is that like I would read books and I would have no one to talk to them with, so I had to go online to find people to talk to
Hmm.
about it. So like if I watched it, it would be like I could watch it, so I could ultimately be able to talk about it with you
Oh, do
and other people who've seen it.
what if you did like something like what Charles Carroll does, where he like streams the movie, and he talks. He talks.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
you're dangerous. You get dangerous. Like you have to be careful with IP and shit when you do stuff like that. But I don't know. I should maybe do more streaming stuff. It's just I don't know. I'm like averse to that level of spectacle. Like I like going on other people's streams, but I think I wouldn't like holding a stream every day. Like I also like I'm not like the most like photogenic televisual person. Like right now, like if I'd been filming this, like I'm like pacing back and forth. Like I love to like pace when I'm talking and stuff like that. So I don't know if I'd be a great streamer.
hmm. Oh, 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 yeah, yeah. You might just be overthinking that because people are able to like tolerate a lot. Um,
Yeah, no, you're probably right. Like I probably could. It's just like I don't know. I've been working on the things I'm working on. I might try to expand more into stuff like that in the next couple of months, I guess.
but even then, like I think something interesting about that I should bring up because I was thinking of like there was this documentary based on how they edit. So in between cuts, they like Straub and his wife Danielle, they would have like these kind of fierce arguments about like where the cuts they were because they were kind of like radical because like to them it was like about the drama of their psychological thought in between the cuts, but it's not like visible. All the traces of that is hidden. The one thing I was trying to say was that relating to what you were saying about the patience is sometimes patience can be a form of genius because there's so many contradictions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think patience is like a strong form of genius.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's all I had. Good talking to you.
Oh yeah. Well, I was gonna say like stuff like that where it's like if people like an artist putting like so much thought and concern into something like like this cut has to be like perfect, like and like they have all of this that they're like putting into it. I think that even if like most viewers or like a lot of people can't see that type of thing or like it goes by them without them noticing it or
Hmm.
whatever, I still think that that stuff like psychological is like it's still
No,
there.
yeah,
Like it
yeah,
still affects people, even if they don't feel it, even if they're not like
yeah,
aware of it. So like I'm a big fan of like hyper consideration of things, like like being really careful and concerned for like every detail of things that you're making. I think is like a really like meditative process. Also, like it's really
yeah,
satisfying. Like when you're like just slapping stuff together, it's not that satisfying. But when you put a lot of like care and effort into something, it's more satisfying, even if people don't see
yeah,
it
yeah, for
immediately.
sure. It's like they would be like, oh, we can't cut. We have to let that bird talk. If we cut out that bird talking, it would be the beginning of barbaric thought. Like that was like
Yeah,
their whole
yeah.
approach.
I love stuff like that. I'm gonna tie it all around so I can wrap this whole thing up because I was talking about like VGHS, the video game high school, one of like the first like
Yeah,
crowdfunded
and
attempts at
that's like
making like
Ender's Game,
a
isn't it?
major studio thing. No, not really, dude. It's actually so much weirder. It's closer. The closest thing tonally to it, I think, is like Spy
I,
Kids. It's like a lot like the Spy Kids movies. But there's a great. I watched the behind the scenes thing on this a long time ago, and there's this one scene that it cost them like $10,000 to make because they had to have like a child actor, and to like have a child actor, you have to go through all of these
mhm.
hoops. It like costs a lot of money to like have kids on screen because like they have to have like their protections, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was just this one scene where it's like a child who's like looks like disheveled and poor in like this house that's themed after like Farmville, and it's like all the mobile game players, and it's like a kind of like parody of like films from like the Great Depression where she just like hands a flower to the protagonist, and they wanted to cut this. They wanted to cut this scene so they didn't have to pay for the child actor,
Mm,
etc. And the guy who wrote the script was so demanding, so insistent that it needed to be there, even though it's like not necessary for the plot.
mm,
It doesn't like it's not a completely necessary thing, but it's just this little bit that goes by. It takes like 10 seconds maybe tops in the entire like work itself, and it costs like so much. But like it was something like when I first watched it, me and my friends who were watching it were like, what? That's like
was
fucking
was that
insane. Like
season
that's so
two?
fucking funny. Yeah, I think it's season 2. It might be season 3. Lord knows. I haven't seen it in a while. But it costs them like so much money for this small little detail, and I love that like the guy was so insistent that he needed it to be in there.
Yeah,
You know, like that's like the kind of artist I respect, is like someone who's like, no, I don't care if this is gonna cost $1 million. Like this thing has to
it
be in it. You know, like
that
I
makes
love
me
that.
think of like Krzysztof Kieślowski for the first installment of the Three Colors trilogy. Spent like days, like spent the whole day like dissolving sugar cubes into like a cup of coffee for this one scene, and they had to dissolve for the right amount of time so he could immerse people in the like in her feeling. And
Yeah, like I think taking like that sounds like psychosis to most people, you know, but like to I think serious artists, like that's like you're ultimately doing a bunch of these like things that would be to an outside observer completely insane and
yeah,
ridiculous. But then it's like at the end, like the magic trick is that like all of these things like come together to produce something that could have only been produced
yeah,
that
for
way.
sure.
Cool. All right, man. It's been nice talking to everyone here. I'm gonna
All
wrap
right,
it up
thank you.
now, but peace out. God bless y'all.